Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. Spurs' Europa League run has been the shining light in an otherwise disappointing season. And they have a chance to end a 17-year wait for a major trophy on Wednesday night. So what would it mean for the club and manager Ange Postecoglou if they win the Europa League? Well, joining us now is the one, the only, the legend, our brilliant Spurs podcast View from the Lane host, Danny Kelly, and also another legend, writer of the Athletic FC newsletter. Phil Hay is also with us as well. All right, Danny, let's get into this. It's been 17 years and 80 days, not that I'm counting, since Spurs' last major trophy. Danny, they have a chance to end an unwanted streak tomorrow. Real talk, Danny, and I know you've been here before. Are you nervous?
Do you know what? Normally, I'm not nervous before these games, Io, because, you become used to it. I've seen Spurs I've worked out the other day, if you include replays, probably the thick end of 20 cup finals. And I've got used to not being nervous about them because I can't do anything about them. It's the illogical position that football fans occupy. The thing that we're absolutely insane about, passionate to use that overused word, is the thing we can do least about. We're not the players. We can't do anything about it. But this one I am really nervous because I think it's a gigantic game for Tottenham. Not just the ending of this streak thing, but I think there's a world where they use it they win and they bounce straight back into the Champions League, and much of the damage that's been done to the club and the team over the past 6 years since the Champions League final 2019 is reversed. There's also a scenario where they don't win and players start pining for the Champions League, or at least their agents do, and Spurs cement themselves, despite being the 9th richest club on the planet, into mid-table mediocrity. I think it's that stark, the choice of what's going to happen. Now, of course, the truth often comes between those two extremes, but it's a huge game for Tottenham, the club, and for the fans as well. But that's a separate thing. For the club, it's a huge business game. For Spurs fans, it's just an enormous thing that, if they could throw the trophy drought thing off, that would be magnificent. But also, and here's the thing. There are young people I know who've supported Spurs for 10, 15 years, have never had their faith validated with a trophy. They need that. There are people of my vintage who can't help looking in the shaving mirror in the morning, or the hair mirror in the morning. Not everyone shaves. And a little voice goes off, am I actually going to get to the finishing line without ever seeing them win another trophy? There's a huge amount rising for Spurs fans. So, yes, I am bloody nervous, yeah.
Yeah, I tell you what, Phil, I was looking at the Newcastle winning the League Cup. I was also looking at Palace winning the FA Cup very recently. And I just thought perhaps this is one of those years where it's the year
Bologna
of the
in Italy.
Unlikely winners. Yeah, of Bologna as well.
Yeah.
Another one, yeah. Good call, Danny. Is it time for Spurs? Because I don't think I think it's quite an even final, personally. But, Spurs trophy drought, this could be a real moment.
I can relate to this. I mean, I was 17 when Hearts won the Scottish Cup up north, and they waited for 40 odd years for that. And the general sense around the club was it was never ever going to happen, and you were going to die in your 80s or 90s having seen nothing other than the odd cup final defeat and kind of no shows in the quarterfinals and earlier. And Bologna was a great story actually over in Italy. Newcastle weren't so unlikely. I mean, it's been a long time coming, 70 years domestically, but they aren't having to punch above their weight anymore. They're littered with quality players. They'd most likely finished second in the Premier League if they'd won at Arsenal over the weekend. So realistically, there was a fair chance that the trophy was coming at some stage. Palace are different. I'm a bit wary of the full-blown fairy tale narrative with them because one of the shareholders, John Textor, is a billionaire. They've been taking in Premier League income for well over a decade now. But they're not a bottomless pit of cash. And actually, if you go down to Selhurst Park, you do get the sense of a club who are about as connected locally as any Premier League club are these days. They're still hardcore South London, and they don't seem to have lost that at all. With Spurs, I think you could describe a trophy this season as unlikely because of how unspeakably appalling the league form has been. But Tottenham winning the Europa League, i.e. one of the big six as we used to talk about, winning Europe's secondary competition, it's not exactly a Disney script. It would just be a very odd end to a year in which they've looked pretty rudderless for an awful lot of it.
This year, wouldn't it?
That's exactly it. But it would give a completely different complexion to the year. All that frustration, and then suddenly you're picking up a notable trophy and you're heading for the Champions League. It's a big silver lining if they can do it.
Yeah, Danny, it's a massive silver lining. But, you spoke about certain Spurs fans never seen their team win anything, really, young ones in particular. I wonder what it would mean for those fans. And actually, you know what? I wonder what it would mean for the whole club to lift this trophy. They've won it before in 1972 and 84 when it was, the UEFA Cup. A lot of us still remember that. But, in recent history, European glory. I mean, let's not forget, Spurs have been to a Champions League final in the last few years as well. Yeah. But this is massive.
Yeah, it is. People like me know, Spurs' connection with Europe is notable. They were the first British team to win a European trophy. They were the first British team to win 2 different European trophies. But that has dried up in recent decades. They've had, and the team that didn't win the Champions League in 2019 is the best Spurs team I've ever seen. And I've watched them win, as I say, in the early 70s, then again in the early 80s, win multiple trophies. But that was an amazing team that didn't win it. Look, for a start, the banter that Spurs don't never win a trophy and all the rest of it, that would end, and it's more annoying now than anything else because clearly they should. Look, somebody did a piece of research the other day, and of course in The Athletic, where all these things go on, showing that Spurs' average points per season, no team in the top 5 leagues in Europe has gone 17 years with that average points without winning one of their local trophies or a European trophy. So it's an anomaly. It's an outrider. That monkey could be got off their back. But also, as I say, it'd just be, why? Let's not get into the modern thing of thinking the world is only the Premier League and the Champions League. The Europa League is a fantastic competition. It's been made slightly easier this year, by not parachuting the losers out of the Champions League groups. Let's be honest about that. And it would be fantastic for them to win it. As I say, it has all that I'm repeating myself. It has all that business stuff about getting back into the Champions League. And as I say, you can always shut up players' agents then as well. And it has the personal thing of individual Spurs fans, groups of Spurs fans who watch the games together or go to the games together or go to the pub together, and the sort of unspoken global network that every club has of people who just are Spurs. They could all breathe a huge sigh of relief, punch the air. It would be a joyous thing, a thing of absolute joy. And until Spurs suffered the latest crop of injuries, this time in midfield rather than defence, I was pretty sure that they were going to do it. But things have changed a little bit slightly since then.
It is strange how some clubs get a complex in cup competitions and a complex when it comes to actually winning anything. I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, when fanzines were massively in vogue, there was a fanzine at Hearts that was specifically called Always the Bridesmaid, and that's because that's what we were constantly. When I covered Leeds for years, they haven't won the FA Cup since 1972, and the record in it is becoming so bad. I mean, they haven't been to the semi-final since the mid to late 80s. I remember doing a column after Bielsa's team, which is about as good a Leeds team as there's been for 20 years, were beaten 3-0 down at Crawley, and the headline to it was Leeds in the FA Cup, why do they hate each other? And that's kind of how it feels. And Danny's right, the run that Tottenham on kind of defies analysis and defies statistics, and it does over time get into people's heads.
It does, and you could argue that it's a historical balancing. Because when Spurs won the FA Cup in 1991, they then had more FA Cups than anybody else. Until they lost to Liverpool in 1983 in the League Cup final, they'd never lost a cup final. In fact, I think they went deep into the 20th century without ever losing an FA Cup semi-final. So they had this astonishing record in cup competitions. And they were, that's why the business of them being a cup team came from. And now, in the last 25 years, with the one exception of the 2008 League Cup, they've won nothing. They've actually managed to turn, I think Spurs have been in about 15, 16 major semi-finals this century and managed to turn that into one trophy. Again, it doesn't bear any thinking about. But the important thing here, Ayo and Phil, I think, is that we can talk about this. We are students of the game. We are fans of the game. I'll tell you who won't be talking about this, the Spurs players. Right. The Spurs players, they are 22, 23 years of age. They got no knowledge of this. They don't care about this sort of stuff. Indeed, if they want to talk about, and you see the football men, the ex-players on the TV going, I think Manchester United will win because they always win. I think that's a load of rubbish. I think it's absolute piffle. You win with the players you have, 16 of them, on that rectangle of grass. It's not to do with history and the echoes of history and the badge you're wearing. I just don't buy that. And indeed, if they want to go that route, the Spurs players, the younger ones, can look around the dressing room. There's Son Heung-min. He's won the Asian Championship. There's a World Cup winner. They don't have the same scars that we carry around with us, and certainly Hearts fans carry around with them, Phil.
I sort of broadly agree with that, but the only way in which I do disagree is that, poor form or track records in certain competitions, like cup competitions, definitely get into the heads of supporters. And the one thing it can do is create a bit of an atmosphere among those supporters. I've seen it in stadiums, particularly in the playoffs with Leeds, actually, where you can kind of feel the tension on the basis that the natural assumption whenever Leeds are in the playoffs is that they're going to lose. And it does create this sort of underlying nervousness that I think can affect the players. But these days, I think most are too professional and too switched on to get deeply affected by it. I wanted to ask Danny something, though, because to me, I don't think that the many, many years without a trophy will play on the minds of Tottenham's crowd tomorrow, so much as the fact that they've been so flaky this season and they're so badly down on numbers. If you were fearing defeat tomorrow, wouldn't it be down more to what's gone on under Postecoglou and the way it's been over the past 12 months than the fact that there's been no trophy since, 2008?
Of course. The team is what it is now. It is, the shirt remains the same. The club, in one way, apart from being, a financial institution, the club only really exists. All football clubs only really exist as the collective memory of their supporters. But in reality, they are where they are, Spurs, and they are really not a very good team most weeks. Now, the injuries has played into that. Obviously, they lost the whole defence at one stage. A defence which they are more reliant on in this final than they would normally be because they've got no midfield. The point of your question, I think, Phil, is that yeah, we have to deal with what we are just at the moment. And for 18 months after the initial flush of success with Postecoglou's systems and players and things, Spurs have been on an increasingly painful descent to the point now where they are very likely, unless they win the last game of the season, to end up on an average of 1 point per game. Now, I think you have to be honest about that. They have chucked the second half of the season, haven't they, in the league? They have, for various reasons, had to pick and choose teams that were never going to compete in the Premier League, particularly not one as physically demanding as the one they have now. I've missed the point of your question there, Phil. Yes, they're a terrible team in the league, and they've done a bit better in Europe, albeit in a competition which is weakened by not having the parachuted in teams.
I think what I was getting at is that I think if I was in Bilbao tomorrow, I'd be more concerned about which version of Tottenham are going to turn up and whether it's going to be the side who've been struggling all season, as opposed to the fact that Spurs just don't tend to do it on these nights historically.
Oh no, and that's absolutely right. But the thing is, I think the version of Spurs going to turn up is no longer an option for them, because they can't, without the creative players, without Maddison, without Kulusevski, they can only play one way. They can only hope to out-physique, outrun, outfight, and outstrength a Manchester United team that won't give in to that, as Bodo Glimt did. I think Bodo Glimt had a tremendous wake-up call, and that they're a fantastic team within their own levels. But the Premier League, over the past 2 years, it's certainly overtaken France as the most physical league in world football. Most Premier League teams now, and I'm looking at you, Ayo, and Arsenal, are 8 giants who can run forever and 2 or 3 technical geniuses to try and get the ball through the other 8 giants on the other side. And Bodo Glimt ran into a wall of human muscle with Spurs, and they had no answer to it at all. You could say almost the same thing happened with Frankfurt, particularly in the game in Germany, where they were, I think, first shocked and then unable to cope with the physicality that Spurs' half and half team was able to bring out onto the pitch. Manchester United, of course, have much the same because that's what you have in the Premier League now. Some Spurs have lost at the wrong moment some of the most important cogs in their machine. Equally, don't forget we are all, well, but they have the back five will all be back in place. This is an experiment in human flesh and bone, isn't it? Because most of them, Udogie, Van der Ven, and Christian Romero, have hardly played any football for the past 2 months. They had 45 minutes here, 45 minutes there. It is not ideal preparation for the test that lies ahead. I do think, though, and it's not just about, people will know from the view from the lane that I take the opposite view of what Spursy means. It doesn't mean bottling, it means doing things that you don't expect them to do. And this is exactly the sort of situation where I think they could, with everything that's gone against them in the past few weeks and the whole season, Phil, we're not pretending they're any good particularly. They could come on and win this. I'll give you look. There's an incredible parallel. I was on the ground in 1984 when they won the last trophy against Anderlecht, when Anderlecht really were a brilliant team in the UEFA Cup final, the equivalent of this competition. Spurs had a manager who everyone knew was leaving because he said he was leaving, the great Keith Birkinshaw. So there's the manager. They had an injury crisis, the like of which is only been paralleled in the last season. They went into the game without Steve Perryman, Glenn Hoddle, Ozzy Ardiles and Ray Clemens, who would have been numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 to captain the side. Graham Roberts captained the side and scored the all-important equaliser that led to the penalty shootout. The reserve goalkeeper then saves the penalty. So in incredible adversity, they found a way to win the trophy. And that's my hope, that they will do something as madly Spursy as that. As for are they a better team than Manchester United, I think you can put cigarette paper between most of the squads in the Premier League at the moment. Liverpool have outstanding way of playing and a manager who is not too proud to change the way they play for a game or half a game. We live in the curse of the era of the philosopher manager, my way or the highway, nonsense in a game which is so chaotic as football. United they've done some pretty bad purchasing over the past umpteen years. They're overpaying for players who then underperform. I don't think that's all down to the manager. I think it's just bad planning. But lots of clubs are like that. There's nothing to choose between. I mean, we had a year where the poor teams that came up were just, eviscerated, marmalised, atomised by the Premier League. I watched it very closely. My brother's an Ipswich Town fan, and I've watched many of the games, on TV and things with him. And watching them run into the quality of the Premier League has been painful to watch. Southampton are a joke at this level. But take away. I want to say Arsenal as well, Ayo, just to please you. There you are.
It's just Southampton. Our video producer Liam's a big Southampton fan, and he's just looked at me.
Well, exactly. So he knows.
Squirming in the
he
corner.
knows exactly what I'm talking about, then, doesn't he? He knows I'm not lying. Well, of course, unless
you've just hurt him even more.
No,
his team's gone.
No, unless he lives in the Southampton fantasy world where they're a good team and Tyler Dibbling is worth 100 million quid. Spurs are what they are. The league table, it doesn't lie. It can tell the occasional porky, which doesn't allow for Spurs and Manchester United slightly chucking games. Although United have done less of it, Spurs have really chucked a lot of these games. I think it's ridiculous, of course. I want them to win every game. I understand rotation and all the rest of it.
I feel like Man United have completely written off the Premier League. It seems like they've nailed
the difference is their
everything
manager hasn't admitted that. He keeps on. There is a difference.
The PR game's different.
Yeah.
Okay. But the thing is, Phil, though, I mean, look at Spurs' record against United. I think Spurs are unbeaten in the last 6 games against Manchester United. The 5 of those are under Postecoglou. Look, are United favourites coming into this? Because both teams, no disrespect, have been very woeful in the league this season. Both teams have been very wasteful in the league this season. And I know United, when it comes to trophies in the last, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years, have a bit more under the locker. But I've never thought of a final like this that feels a bit more even.
Maybe very marginal favourites. In fact, I don't really feel like they are. I don't feel like Tottenham are either. we were saying before we started recording, I'm not sure I've ever seen a more 50-50, unpredictable, could go either way matchup in my life. I mean, for all that Tottenham haven't been great in the league, United got away with murder against Lyon in that game at Old Trafford, despite the fight back and despite all the noise and attention around it. They were very lucky not to go out that night. And their form under Amorim in the league is so bad it's untrue. I mean, I always feel like if this wasn't season 1 for them, there's no way he'd be surviving this Europa League final or not. It's really strange. And to go back to what I was saying, I do feel as if Man United have essentially said, look, we might as well finish 17th as finish 15th. It makes no difference. We're not getting relegated because of, as Danny explained, the trouble of the bottom three. There's been that big safety net that was always going to catch them. So it has become kind of Europa League or bust. And I do feel like, to look at the results, that the Premier League has almost been written off for them until we get going again in August. If with both sides at full strength, I'd be sticking the mortgage on Spurs if I had to bet the mortgage. There's every chance I'd lose it, granted. But I do like their best fully fit 11 more than I like Man United's best fully fit 11. The fact is, Spurs are not at full strength, and Kulusevski, on top of everything else, is such a big, big loss for them. And that is the sort of kick in the teeth that could just tip things against them when it comes to it. But I don't think Man United can be much more confident about this game than Tottenham can be. I don't think either will have huge amounts of underlying confidence, if truth be told.
Yeah, does league position matter, Danny? Both teams are woeful in the league right now. I mean, in any other league situation, both teams on this current tally of points would probably be relegated, to be honest with you. I mean, but this is still a cup tie. This is still a final. You still have the opportunity to salvage something on what has been not the greatest season.
League position doesn't matter in this game that's coming up, clearly. It matters in other ways. Daniel Levy and his associates would say, every place that you finish down the league is another 2.5-3 million quid, whatever it is, gone. But that will all fade into insignificance if they can win this game and qualify for next year's Champions League. No, the league position doesn't matter at all. What we have here is it's an almost insanely pure sporting situation, isn't it? Where everything that's gone before in the season and everything that the players know about their team, and you're right, Phil, with Spurs at full strength, I think I would make them slight favourites, but they're not. But they have something that even footballers, for all the way they're pampered and all the money they get paid and all the rest of it, which, who wouldn't sign those contracts? I've got no problem with that. But they are presented here with something that money can't buy. The one thing in life that you can't get just by willing it or buying it is opportunity. That has to be handed to you. That has to come your way. And the players of both sides here have an enormous opportunity to turn a frankly ridiculous, and it is ridiculous how bad they've been in the league, both of them, although they ought to be careful because being bad becomes a habit. They have an opportunity here to turn not just one night of glory, to produce one night of glory and a trophy, which matters more to Spurs than it does to Manchester United, though I'm not underplaying how much it matters to Manchester United as well, but to change the whole way that they're looked at historically. In Spurs' case, it is nuts. Here it is. If they win, it is statistically, with the trophy, Spurs' best season for a generation, better than all the great teams under Pochettino. If they lose, it is the worst Spurs team. And now I ask you to put a date on it. I think I worked back in over 110 years before they lost 20. They've already lost 25 games, I think. They could end up losing 27 games in a season and be the worst Spurs team ever. It's that much on the line, which of course is just delicious for everybody who isn't a supporter of either of the clubs. And particularly, Ayo, for Arsenal fans.
This is like the worst final of all time.
You can't lose, can you? Because either Spurs or Man United are going to lose.
I don't know who I want to win this. This is the weird one. I mean, Phil, I can't think of a time where two teams have made a final like this and have been so bad when it comes to their league form, surely.
I don't know what it says about the Europa League, really, that teams in 16th and 17th have made it this far. And I think to give Tottenham their due, that win over Eintracht in particular was a big result. Showed a really, really thick skin, and they have had a thicker
Former
skin
winners
in
of the
Europe.
Cup, actually, yeah.
Yeah, and third in the Bundesliga in Germany,
and
going
got
into the
7
Champions
against a
League.
very, very good Bilbao team.
Yeah, absolutely. And have actually got it together on that front in a way that they just haven't been able to domestically. I mean, neither season ticket's been value for money at all. Man United have got 6 wins at home and 21 goals. Like that's what you pay for when your team's going down. But it does mean that league form is totally irrelevant tomorrow because neither side have any. It's that simple, isn't it? It's not as if Spurs or Man United are on a run of 6, 7, 8, 9 games without defeat, so you can analyse the fixture on that basis. Any time these two play in the Premier League, not to put too fine a point in it, I jot it down as a defeat. It feels almost inevitable at the moment, and at best they'll dig it out against teams so far down the table they can hardly fail to lose those games. Fail to win those games. But I think it's a strange scenario where if whoever wins in Bilbao can kind of jot this down as a successful season, but the fact that so much is resting on one game and that it's taken one solitary game to rescue everything for them tells you that both seasons have been anything but.
Yeah, spot on. Right, let's move on quickly to Ange Postecoglou, Phil. He's been quite consistent in his messaging, I should say, that he always wins something in his second season at least, and I don't know whether this is a blessing or a curse for him. But if you look at Amorim on the other side, you'd like to think, regardless of what happens in this final, there is still a bit of a rope left for him to do his work. Where do you think the rope is for Ange Postecoglou and his job, regardless of what happens in this final?
Good question. Do you know what resonated with me a little bit unexpectedly was the speech he did in the dressing room after the semi-final against Bodo Glimt after they went through, and how engaged I thought the players seemed to be with it. It doesn't seem to me as if they're done with him mentally. The relationship there still seems to be fairly strong despite everything. And I guess on that basis, sacking him isn't necessarily as easy or as productive a move as it might seem to some people. We've all been assuming that winning the Europa League was more likely to change things for him than it was for Amorim because it might save his job. Amorim, things Danny said, is most likely safe either way, although neither of them would get away with their teams being this woeful again next season. That goes without saying.
It wouldn't make October,
the only thing is,
the current form.
No, I really don't think they would. And I mean, Amorim was almost saying himself a week or so ago, if I can't sort this out next season, I'm pretty much going to have to go, and that's how it would be. The thing is, though, it doesn't make that much sense, I don't think, strategically, for a club's faith in a manager to be swayed by one match. That might sound a bit stupid, but Spurs either have confidence in Postecoglou or they don't, and the Europa League final shouldn't fundamentally change that, because if it does, then they're not thinking dispassionately, which I always think is quite important, when it comes to what you're deciding to do with a coach. If the thought process is he's gone if we don't win on Wednesday, but he's fine if we do, it doesn't really smack of a club with the courage of their convictions. And I'm really, really fascinated to see how Levy and the board at Spurs call this, more to the point whether they've already called it privately. My gut feeling, and from what we're reading and seeing everywhere, it feels as if Ange's time might be up no matter what. But doing that becomes so much more difficult if he's holding the Europa League and if he's got them into the Champions League.
Yeah, Danny, where does this fan base see Ange Postecoglou next season, regardless of what happens on Wednesday? Be honest, because I think we're trying to read the room here, but you don't feel like he's got the same kind of rope as Amorim does, who's just technically beginning his job at Manchester United and also came in halfway through the season.
I may be stupid and I may be wrong about most things, but I'm never dishonest.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question that he's leaving at the end of the season. I think it's as obvious as the nose on my face. Because if you're not one of the clubs who is funded by an American hedge fund or oil money or a state, what you require to succeed, and this is in England and beyond, is an absolutely laser focus on the football team. Now, Spurs don't have that. Because they are, there is part of them that's focused on growing the value of the business. And because, we know why. Because the ownership group will all make a gigantic personal profit that will see their family safe from financial problems for the next 20 generations when that day comes. But in this case, they have to be laser focused if they want to be serious about the manager. And the truth is, and I understand the injuries and all the rest of it, that Postecoglou's record will not allow him to stay. You cannot sustain those defeats, even with a win in the Europa League. Now, this is complicated ever so slightly by the fact that Spurs don't have the director of football is currently up in the air. Paratici, we believe, is coming back, but he's not allowed to come back till a month's time. The new CEO, the guy who was at Arsenal, he doesn't start till July. So who is going to appoint this manager? And will he have the approval? Of course, this is all going on in the background. I'm sure they're all working away in the background. And the other complicating issue is there isn't an obvious candidate, because who would want to take over Spurs as they currently are? Having said that, if they win, and this is where Postecoglou may end up cutting his own throat, he organises the win, and the job suddenly becomes much more attractive to many more excellent managers. But I don't think he can survive the season we've had. And you ask for a fan's view, and of course, it's slightly exaggerated. And there is, of course, you'll have been through this at Arsenal in the early days of Mikel Arteta, in, out, and all the rest of that stuff. As if we have any control over that. Fans getting out, getting their backsides on fire about Ange out, as if I have any control over it at all. Yeah. He has, in the last 2 or 3 months, gone into a kind of damage limitation mode with the press. You know, he's pretty niggly with the press. He's entitled. He can do what he likes. He's a grown man, but he must expect us to respond to it. And also, he's been gaslighting the Spurs fans. Seeing one thing on the pitch and then being told it's something else and we don't understand it has not gone down well with the Spurs fans. And I understand it because some of these interviews he gives are not relating to the football as it is, but they are, in fact, preparations for his next job interview, aren't they? Where he can say, I had these injuries, I had to do this and that with the league and all the rest of it. But I still, and when he can turn around and say, and I won the Europa League, well, fantastic. But I suspect the best scenario for everybody will be for Spurs to win. He can then leave with his head held high, and I will applaud him because it's a great achievement, but they cannot hide away from a league season that has teetered between horrible and disastrous.
I thought that week last season where Spurs lost to Manchester City and the title was on the line was a bit of a tipping point. He seemed to completely misread the way in which the crowd were going to approach that fixture and what they wanted to happen in that fixture. And he didn't seem to particularly like the attitude towards that fixture, the idea that it might be better to lose it so that Arsenal don't win the title. And whatever your view on that, there's no doubt that local rivalry, wherever you are, makes people see things in their own way and sometimes in funny ways or ways that other people might criticise. But that's how it was. He didn't seem to react particularly well to that. I think he found it difficult to digest the atmosphere around him, and it doesn't seem as if it's ever recovered. In terms of damage limitation, though, I've seen this with a lot of managers. I do understand why they do it, because you sometimes get into scenarios where if you're going to be totally, thoroughly, painfully honest about what's going on, you're pretty much calling for your own sacking. But it's interesting to hear, because I would 100% wanted to hear Danny's view on this. It's interesting to me because I think that the results say that he will go. I think Tottenham will go for a change. But it's interesting to hear that Danny seems to be moving in the direction of thinking that yes, he does need to go.
Yeah, very quickly before we wrap up, Danny, I want to ask you for the surreal now. I want you to imagine you are Ange Postecoglou right now. You probably know you might not be here next season. You haven't had the best season with these players, but yet you still want them to believe in you enough to try and get something out of this final. What are you saying to them?
He's an intelligent guy, and he clearly connects with human beings pretty well. You saw that speech he made, as Phil referred to. I think, and this is philosophy rather than football tactics, I think he has to try and lock into that energy that groups of young people often it's young men, can develop through camaraderie. I see it in groups, musicians, where they have one great record, one great album in them. You see it in the Leicester City team that won the title. They're never going to win it another year. The energy they expended in winning it in 2016 was not replicable. I would try and lock into the energy that a group of people, musicians, footballers, soldiers, whoever, can have once only. And again, I go back to this thing of opportunity. Make them concentrate not on the cost of the failure or what it would mean, but on what the prize for success would be. And in their cases, they still get paid whether they win or lose. They're still famous whether they win or lose. They still have the gold-plated cars whether they win or lose. What they don't have whether they lose is the legendary states that would come with victory. And it's that I would try to put into their minds. You can overnight mean that schoolboys will still be talking about you in 50 years' time.
Right, let's leave it there, gents. Danny, Phil, really appreciate your time. And also thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And also leave us a comment as well. That is it for now. We're back soon. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.